everybody. Good morning. I feel like I'm starting a class or something.
Yeah. Silence. Shh.
Yeah, I'm gonna take roll. Morning, everybody. We got some open chairs up front. I know Derek needs to come up here and sit down, and Ben.
Hey, Ben.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. How many first-time Caffeinated? I see lots of new faces. Awesome. Thank you very much for attending. I'm Jay Ferracane. I run a studio called Angry+Bovine. I've been doing Caffeinated now, pre-pandemic, for about 7 years, so thanks for coming back. We're fortunate to be able to do the show now from this spot. This is an extension of CU. This is CMCI's graduate program. It's called Studio. If you're interested in that, there's lots of studio folks in here today. Ask them about what they're doing in here, but it's pretty much a creative accelerator, maker, entrepreneur kind of startup grad school program. So check in with us more about that. But big thanks to them for giving us a place to call home. And we're super stoked as we've started this back up. We've been so fortunate to have some really awesome sponsors. Big thanks to Buck Ross for doing our video production. We are on lots of channels now, so feel free to find us anywhere, as every time we can one of these shows and we put them up, YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Vimeo, wherever. We're on all the big ones, MySpace, YouTube. And then big thanks to TDA for funding us to do this every week or every month. And this is a first Friday month, so Instagram does weird things. Our announcements don't always go out, but just have it in your head. First Friday, there's probably something pretty rad happening here at Caffeinated. Pro Photo Rental for giving us the stuff to record this with. Chuck Coffee at Snappy Little Numbers gave us our own theme show this year, which is really great. And then also massive thanks to Josh at the Coffee Ride for giving us caffeine in our namesake. But we're just stoked to have you guys here. Thank you so much for attending. And to the real meat of it all, today we have Andrew Lincoln. What's up, dude?
Hey, how you doing?
Hybrid creative director, brand marketer, dad, cyclist, outdoorist. I'm gonna run through a couple things here really quick. And then I'm gonna come back because I just realized where I am in all of this.
Yeah, you gotta go.
Yeah, so before I do that, because I really know what I'm doing with my day job. Near and dear to my heart, I'm a big fan of this nonprofit, namely because it's my wife's, but also it's what I do pretty much every day if I'm not doing my day job or talking to people like you. Tomorrow night, right here in Boulder, fundraiser for helping the American Mustang. Great organization to come out and support. It'll be killer food from Bijou, really great cocktails, lots of cool auction items, and you don't have to be a horse person to enjoy yourself there, because I'm not. I always look at it as like the scene in Pulp Fiction where he goes, I'm a vegetarian because my girlfriend's a vegetarian. I'm a horse person because my wife's a horse person. And so really all I do is build fence and talk to people about how awesome it is what she's doing. So feel free to check out greatescapemustangs.org if you're interested in that, and that gets some of the pluggy stuff out of the way. Our sponsors. Now this is Andrew.
Oh, hey.
We're back. Hey. So I think I first met you riding bikes.
Yeah.
And then I remember it was kind of weird because I thought at the time you were working at Crispin, and I'm like, how's he out in the middle of the day riding bikes? And I'm like, and he's so nice, and he seems not like crazy stressed out, which is kind of the antithesis of that world.
It's very the anti of that, yeah.
Anyway, not to give it all away, but I'm super stoked. Actually, Andrew, I've tried to get him to do this show pre-pandemic lots and lots of times, and I always got the push off of like, I don't know what I'd talk about, and I'm like, and you're so interesting and nice, and
thanks,
anyway,
man.
Here you are. So you're gonna take us a little bit on a journey about where he's been, where he came from, what he's up to now, and kind of what you've been seeking all along. So I don't wanna wreck your stuff here. I'm gonna kind of get us up to this, and
yeah, and I'll press the button.
And it's not the guy from The Walking Dead, by the way. I know that a lot of people thought that. It's this one, this Andrew.
Oddly enough, yeah, I do get that. I used to live in LA, and I used to make restaurant reservations, and I'd be like, yep, Andrew Lincoln. They're like,
you got
great.
The best table, I bet.
I'd walk in, I'd be like, Andrew Lincoln's here. They're like, just hold on. And then I find myself sitting next to the kitchen or bathroom. But that's a true thing.
You do make self-reference jokes that everybody loves Raymond, too, about you.
Oh yeah, everyone says I'm also going to be him when I'm older. Like,
yeah,
when I do those old filters,
yeah.
I look like
Raymond.
Everyone loves. Yeah. My wife's not cool about that. But anyways. But yeah, so I'm Andrew Lincoln. I'm not from The Walking Dead or the movie Love Actually, if you're familiar. I'm currently VP of Creative, Head of Creative, whatever you want to call it, at Outside. Yes, the magazine, but it's not the magazine. It's actually the parent company, and the magazine's part of it. Need to make that clear just for anyone.
How many outside folks here? Are there outside folks here?
Oh, good. They're all
good.
Well, they're busy outside.
You can say whatever you want.
Yeah, they'll see this later. Just kidding. Yeah, no. They're actually outside doing stuff. That's kind of part of the culture, which is cool. But yeah. So I really want to just talk about first off where I kind of started. My hope is to maybe inspire you guys, just take you on a little bit of my journey, maybe give you guys some solace and maybe my suffering and things that I went through as you kind of do whatever you're doing in the future, currently, all that good stuff. But I've been on a journey, I feel like, in the last handful of years, mentally and physically maybe.
Yeah.
I feel like I look good.
I think everyone's been on a journey, and as well, especially you with not only your work path, but what we've just gone through and
yeah, of course.
The stitch of time.
The stitch of time, exactly. So just to kind of give you guys some context. So I actually got my start in the creative industry as far as like the digital interactive realm, which back in late 90s, early 2000s, like that was sort of the rage, like banner ads, Razorfish, and I know we talked about Razorfish. So I actually went to school for not advertising or design necessarily, but actually something called like interactive media, where it was like, you did learn design, but you also learned the philosophy behind how design can help engage people through like, UX design was part of that. And so I got really into UX design as well as a myriad of other mediums to really help engage people, the senses, feelings, all that good stuff. Funny enough that I thought I was gonna be like some cool digital artist, like doing installations or whatever. Then I got dropped in like the traditional ad
Isn't it
agency.
funny though, when you come out of school, you're like, I'm gonna work on Metallica album covers.
Yeah, all day.
I'm gonna do CDs, man. And then you like work on like B2B software.
Yeah, well so I went and a friend here who actually worked at the same place, FCBI, which is by the way, all agencies back in the day
had to have the eye.
Little eye, like interactive, little wing of creatives and folks. And, basically what that meant is that you did banner ads, you did websites, you did the cool...
A lot of Flash.
A lot of Flash.
Yep.
And that happened. But then quickly what happens is they get swallowed up or integrated or merged or whatever you want to say. But like that kind of happened with me at FCB Chicago. So I'm from Chicago originally, if anyone doesn't know. So I was there, I went to school there. But then sort of this whole notion of being part of the agency, doing digital creative stuff, and that kind of was like my, I would say, hack into the traditional world, as they say. And it was exciting. So I went from like Chicago, then I kind of got brought into another interactive agency called Tequila, which is part of TBWA, which then got merged into Giant Day. Which again, if you
we
guys
all lived through those phases of like,
merger,
you ended up having, like they would expand and contract. It would be like 5 names out, then they're like, just rename it.
Totally.
Yeah.
And so it was interesting. So like early on, I really got, indoctrinated with change and merges and culture clashing. And that's sort of a little foreshadowing for later. So did Giant Day and Night. Again, if you're familiar with that agency, if you read the Steve Jobs book, it's the agency that did 1984. A lot of the great advertising from that Apple era in the early days. So that's where I really got my start on understanding, what it is to work hard and late. My first day of work there was 48 hours straight. I didn't even go to orientation. I didn't know where the bathroom was for the first bunch of hours. I was literally holding to go to the bathroom, and because I didn't want to be like,
hey guys, how do I do this?
Where do I go? I just had to working. But so I kind of really enjoyed that, which then led me to, fortunately here in Boulder, Crispin, if you guys are familiar with, there's some people here I've worked with for many, many, many years at Crispin, where, there I felt like I found my tribe, my sort of mental, other people on my mental level as far as I'm not talking about smarts, but the maybe the love of suffering and creating great work. But not only that, but also, again, my life was so much of digital and being segmented, but this is a place of everyone was...
It was full tilt.
It was full, it was everything.
It was almost competitive.
It was full tilt, but also you're just it doesn't matter what medium, it's about the idea, and it was cool. And it was really, really exciting. And so, again, there's only one person here actually who's been there anyone longer, remotely close, but I was there for 7+ years, and people tell me that was a long time.
Yep.
And I was like, it was? It felt like a year, but it was definitely, for something that's crazy amount of time.
Deep secret, we both grew up in the military, so I think it's been things that made us endure a lot longer than we normally should have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was an Army brat, and so my dad was in the military, so I definitely was enduring change.
And you're used to just people maybe not treating you with the most softness, and you just still got your shit done. You know?
No, it's you have a role, go do it,
Yeah.
and you just shut your mouth. So that was, from my military upbringing. So that's maybe why it worked.
Yeah.
And then that I would say gave me and some other folks like some confidence in working together, really building some bonds. And I actually ended up being one of the co-founders of a agency here in Boulder, Work in Progress, WIP, depending on who you know. But that was awesome. I mean, like, it was really cool to start something, learn so much from people here, but as well as people at Crispin to do that. And I was.
There's a lot of businesses that spun out of that place because you had people that were like, hey, dude, I know how to do this. And they wanted a different culture, but they were still tied to what they were doing. And it was fascinating to watch the diaspora of all that.
It is kind of funny. Everyone's like, oh, you're all going to go chase Justin's nut butter clients. But like, I think for me, what really is interesting, because I didn't think I was going to be in Boulder this long, but I think once you are in a place like Boulder and Colorado in general, you start to find, and again, this is more foreshadowing, but start to find other things that are interesting. And so I wanted to stay. That's kind of why, another thing was like, well, maybe try starting a company. So, all this stuff was super exciting. I felt like I made some cool work. Maybe people don't agree, but I felt like it was really exciting. We got accolades. Like, I'll just kind of quickly go through some of this. Again, some people here and some friends probably gonna watch this later that are part of this. But like, I was super excited and worked hard on working on Domino's Pizza. And again, especially taking my digital experience and really being able to put that at the center of brand building and business change, and that's kind of what happened with Domino's. So a lot of stuff I worked on was, if you guys pay attention to any of that stuff, but like, you can order pizza using emoji, you can do like the voice activated stuff, like hell, we made a delivery car that kept pizzas warm, and like smartwatches and smart TVs and all this good stuff. So it was bringing tech to brand building, and that was exciting for me. Of course, there's accolades, and I feel like I'd be lying if I wasn't saying like, that is super cool. Like, when your work gets recognized in the industry. And then, going to Work in Progress, did put a cliffside shop, we called it, but we put a pop-up shop on the side of a mountain for climbers here in Eldora Canyon of all places.
Yeah.
So that maybe was starting to be a little bit of like my outside like passion starting to come into my work.
The thing, and it was interesting in all of that, and maybe it's where you started in your school, but it gets talked about a lot these days is experience, right?
Yeah.
And like, we have separate divisions of people who go out and be UX people and stuff, but like, I think all creatives in some way are experience builders, right? And like, It's just rad to see where you've taken it from like, I hold this thing in my hand, what if we made this part easier? Or the idea of like the experience of like, well, this is where somebody would use this stuff, the cliffside kind of thing. I always thought these were such cool ads.
And again, I loved it because it's really one of those things of like, if we think about it, a lot of us are creatives or entrepreneurs or whatever, but like, your creativity can affect so much parts of something if you have the right people that want to work together, and that doesn't always happen. And luckily, I've been part of teams that have done that. Even with like, for me, this is super exciting. This is probably one of my first places where passion meets work. It was about, we helped invent.
This is Epic Mix.
Epic Mix, yeah. So if you guys are familiar, it's Vail Resorts down the road was one of our clients, and we helped build a gamified mountain experience. Some people were like, holy crap, you're making us bring our phones and technology out, like, how dare you? But in reality, what it was doing was using technology and ideas to like get you outside more. So that was something I was really excited about and part of with our team of like using technology to get people outside, which again is the foreshadowing for stuff.
But in some way, that is like at the heart of advertising, creative, or it's usually to make somebody go do something they probably wouldn't do on their own. Whether it's buy something, click a button, or go outside. So maybe it's like using evil for good now, right?
Exactly. And I mean, now I'm sure like a different generation be like, oh yeah, technology, like you couldn't do anything. Like, funny enough, now I'm like, I couldn't see myself not using my iPhone, or to get to a trailhead or find something. Like, I'm lost actually. I took a left turn at this trail, and now I'm like, where do I actually go? Like, it's crazy to think that was a problem, but that's what got me really happy.
Yeah, we want you happy.
That's all it's all about these days. So, but now this is where, and I'm kind of taking a hard left turn a little bit, and where a lot of my values and a lot of my like sort of growth has happened. I want to say, maybe not total growth, but like attempt growth. Was it worth it? Like, was all that crazy stuff worth it? Like, if you start to think about it, like for me personally, it was like, man, I really started perfecting sleep deprivation and all-nighters. I say it, I think I was telling you.
Like I got really good at having rest.
So good, and still putting a smile on my face. But like, I met my now wife, who used to work at Crispin too. I met her on an all-night like work binge on Microsoft. And that's where I met her, and that's where like it was sort of like we bonded in that for years down later that we can talk about. But yeah, so like I did that. I stewed in my own, I basically had perpetual anxiety and stress. I didn't really know that. I'll say this even before, like right before COVID, I would say I started going through this growth of like understanding and being very self-aware of what was happening, and like creativity can do that to you, and like the pressure, and again, I'm sure all of us feel that way, but it was like, is that good? Probably not. So like I neglected because of that stuff, like because of that like constant, like I gotta like succeed, and this is super cool. I'm like a Navy SEAL of creativity.
Special ops.
Yeah, I'm special ops, and again, military, like I actually did want to do that. So like this is my way of doing it without guns. But I neglected my mental and physical wellness. Like
I think creatives it is a somewhat selfless thing, because you put aside so much of your stuff.
Totally.
To get the thing done.
Totally, and like, exactly. And like, I'll even say when I neglected my physical, like, I'll still say when I first moved to Colorado, within the first year after working so much, and again, it was definitely worth it and exciting, and I learned so much that I say, but maybe not. I remember getting pulmonary edema, and if you know what that is, like if you watch any Everest documentary, it's when your lungs fill up with blood, and I was basically letting off steam in high altitude, but of course I'm like, I'm cool, like I'm physically fit, I can do this, I'm young. I wasn't, because I was basically stuck inside all the time, and I got pulmonary edema, which is like, everyone's like just at high altitude from like hanging out like in copper, like that's
Copper's pretty high though, actually.
I mean, yeah, but again, it's one of those things where it's like, like I just was so neglectful of it that I didn't even realize like I was putting myself in harm in that way, but again, that's me being probably immature too. And young and dumb, and let's be honest. But now, don't get me started on missed family time. Like, starting a company was insane. Like,
and you were having kids at the time too.
Well, I did this all wrong, I say. And like, it was the most exciting thing to do, but it's also the most like probably bad thing for me to do at the time. My wife and I just got married, and we had our first kid, and I was starting an agency, work in progress, where I was traveling all the time, and so I basically had in my mind two masters, like the success of the agency and the success of my family. I can't be 100% on both things. And so like, that just wreaked havoc on my mental and physical, mostly mental. So like, to be honest, like it was just maybe not worth it. I'll get into that in a minute, but because you own a company, you're working at these places, you're doing well, you love being called on. I was always on call, like, a doctor. I'm not a doctor.
You're at the behest of your client a lot of times.
Exactly.
And your family too.
Exactly.
But that's the important one.
And that's for me. So like, for me, it's like this idea of like, all that happened. Again, I say it's worth it in a way, but at the same token, it's not. Like, and this is where I kind of I've been over the last handful of years looking at culture and like, what was the culture I was in then? And it was hustle culture. Like, again, I don't know if that's the right term or whatever, but that's what
But there's a value placed on how hard do you.
Totally, and again,
to what extent you'll kill yourself to get something done.
Exactly, and again, I learned a lot about myself. It helped me in the long run with the experience and being faster at things, but hustle culture is just, as creatives, as entrepreneurs, again, we're in Boulder, the hotbed of a lot of startups as well, and it's like grind all the time, and like, I'm like, shit, like I don't know if that was good. There's actually another way, I think, to be successful, and like, I say it, I'm like, shit, like I drank the Kool-Aid for many, many years. And this is from Family Guy, so I love that part. But really, it's not sustainable. And honestly, like I would say, like my own failures and successes maybe might be that, but I would say mostly my failures really have like proved this to me. And of course, talking with other folks and like seeing like what's happened in their lives of like, well, what were you doing? Like you were grinding it out all the time. You were not putting yourself, so like it's not sustainable, especially for obviously you. My family, it wasn't, like, I'll just say that. And then here's my little hippy dippy part of the thing. But like, it's not for the planet. Like, if you're stuck inside,
Yeah, unhappy people don't make a happy planet, so.
But yeah, so like, that's where, and I'll say this, and I had someone's here, I'm gonna say Tony, my mentor and boss at Crispin, who actually did do this. And he was there for many, his name, 20, how many, Tony? Sorry, I'm gonna call you out. How many years now were you at? 20 plus years at this place. And one of the things I learned from him and a couple other people there as well is like, you got to find that sort of balance. And for me, that was like, and I actually got really into cycling because of a lot of these people, but like, I found my mental refuge and like inspiration when I was outside in nature. And that was by bike for me. again, that's Colorado. Everyone's like, yeah, doesn't everyone
Yeah,
do
it's
that?
like-
You're hiking, you're climbing, you're doing something. But like that's really what got, I think, me where I did end up doing a lot of the work that some of the work I showed you before that I was really excited about and proud of, because it was something like, holy shit, like you can have work-life balance and do great work. But I think for majority of people that doesn't.
I think it also, there's a fundamental part of like, creatives got to reach a maturity standpoint. And for some it happens really early on. But for me, I think I've only started to enter into this where I'm like, I have the consciousness to be like, slow down and go, why am I doing this? And what's the real value I'm getting out of it? You know?
Exactly.
And maybe I should just go ride my bike right now. It takes like, there's a conscious step at least. I don't care when you make it.
We've
but
tried
you
to
have
ride
make-
bikes during the day too, and you can never do it, and I can't do it. Yeah. But like, and I'll say this again, we're kind of talking about this a little bit, but like, you know, me like being outside and doing this escape, like really helped me prioritize, like it, you know, gives me that moment to like think about what's important in life. And again, it's some of those things, like I was sleep deprived. So like, you know, because of that, really, I honestly, and I'm not anti-agency, I'll just say this because I actually was at another agency previously before this job, but in general, I did say goodbye to sort of the agency hustle culture life. And to me, it was like, from a career-wise, it means going brand side, which a lot of people I think are doing now as well. But that's just kind of why I went there. So again, this isn't like me going, fuck you agency, is like, this is not that at all. It is literally about, I hope this inspires leaders of agencies, but also just sharing my journey with you guys. But like, this is maybe me prioritizing, this is why I probably went brand side too, but like, you know, I haven't had a work binge all-nighter in a very long time since I left the agency.
I can help you. Yeah, you can come help me out on some of my stuff if you want.
I need more sleep, but I was always like, have kids, and like, it's funny, like once we had our 2 kids, like I realized more and more like, holy shit, like if I actually don't get sleep, I can't be the best self in all aspects of my life. And you know, work-life balance, I know it sounds so obvious and cheesy, but like people in our industry and our mindsets that want to succeed, it's hard to think about that. Then I actually left agency life, to be quite honest too, is like at Crispin and other places like that, I just really learned that like I'm a creative person, so I want to do great work. I want to do impactful work. I want to be able to get the path of least resistance to doing great work. And I find that when you're internal, which is why I went there, is like you're actually part of bigger company decision making, even though you might not make all of it right away.
You have more context.
You have more tons of more context, and like I feel like I became a better creative doing that. Like shit, like at my first in-house job, I was given budget to like manage post-production, like work and creativity. I'm like, holy crap, idiots, like why would they give me money? I'm gonna go crazy. But it was one of those things where actually it was the opposite. You start to approach creativity a little different, and you start to realize there's a bigger impact versus sometimes, unfortunately, an agency or design studio or whatever, like sometimes you're the service, which is why you're working all nights. You're always on call. You're sort of at the beckoning call of decision making that, to be quite honest, like is just one of like 30 other major decisions happening, and you're just part of like a trial and error, unfortunately.
Well, and it is an interesting thing because, you know, like when we first started Studio, BDW, what all the instances it was, most of our students went to agency. Yeah. And I think we were raised in a culture of, well, if you go brand side, client side,
you're terrible.
You couldn't cut it at an agency. But I think now we see most of our students go to brand side because like they're like, what, dude, I own it. I have ownership. Yeah. And that's a really interesting concept as a creative to me, because I think there was this weird byproduct that agencies do have this luxury of being outside and not being mired in some stuff, but also at the same time, sometimes knowing all that context is a very helpful tool for strategy and design.
And I'll say I was lucky enough to like be part of a team with Domino's, especially where we actually did have impact on the company, but that is like a unicorn. Like in most cases this doesn't happen, but like yes, you do feel that way where you have more impact. And that's honestly like, even when I was an agency before being at outside, I was trying to recruit people, and that was like, I was kind of surprised that you had to actually sell them. I'm like, well, we actually give you more money than in-house. Oh, well, actually, you know, like, you get free snacks in the, you know.
So you don't leave.
So you don't, exactly. And it was like all these
don't
like
go
weird,
outside,
it was
do
all
more
these
work.
weird, it was exactly, it's so weird. It's all these weird perks, and like I was kind of like in my head, I'm like, dude, I never would have like ever been like, like why am I need to be sold on not going to an agency? But it's funny is that I think besides myself, I think there's a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of you here are very much the pandemic, that does affect a lot of us, and that does affect like how much we prioritize. And I think a lot of people are doing that now, which is good. I honestly feel like that is really good, and especially like, again, I was starting this journey before the pandemic a little bit, but yeah. Anyways, some other stuff is like what I love about it. I work for Outside, so they want you to get outside, which is cool. And I'm like, great. I don't feel guilty now going on a bike ride, but
it's in our name.
Yeah, it's in our name. Yeah. And then I've been able to, really work on my mental, and of course, family is really important. So, what I've been calling this part of my life, talking with you, called it some other things, but like it is sort of my values phase of life. Maybe it's my midlife crisis. I don't know, but it really is so much like where I'm trying to especially with work, like where I can focus my personal values, and just so you guys know what those are, it's like I want people to be less stressed and anxious. I want, for mental health. I suffered through a lot of that many, many years until recent. I didn't know that. And then also I love the notion because it helped me so much outside, like activity, being with nature does help. And it can be something that you use as a tool and like a superpower if you can get to use it for your own personal goals and like career stuff. So I am very fortunate, I'll say this, and like I think we talked about this too, is like I am very fortunate to be able to choose that where I can align my values and my career values.
But that's the interesting thing as we were thinking through this. Number one, prioritization is, if we put it in terms of design, hierarchy, right? Like that's choosing what order.
Yeah, exactly.
But then also, back to our military upbringing, things like that. I remember I was doing some work for an agency in Portland, and they were like, hey, we need you on this because like we got a bunch of people internally that don't want to work on this project. And I'm like, you have a choice?
Yeah.
Like I grew up in the military. I was like, they gave you a gun, you just marched in, and you're like, you started doing shit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you have a choice, and then it made me think, oh, we have choices.
Yeah.
And of course we do, right? Like, and so I do think that's a big step and maybe a change of brain habit for modern creatives is that you don't have to work on everything that is in front of you.
And I've laughed sometimes, and people are like, I don't want to do that. I was like, what? Like, I'm like, I can't do that. I'm like, okay. Like, I didn't know there was a choice. But no, you actually do have choices is what I'm realizing. And so like my phase 2, and we'll get into some of the work, like kind of what's done this just to kind of show you guys. But like, I've been continuing to hone what matters in life. I'm still, of course, trying to always work-life balance. I have a better opportunity to do it now with my family and of course my wellness. I'm always in a constant, self-improvement. Again, you guys should do that as well, and I'm sure you are. But it's funny enough, that's also why, the agency we started was called Work in Progress too. It is very much like,
we're figuring it out.
That was something very close and dear to my heart, which, hopefully is still part of that culture, but like really, doing that. And I think the other part that I'm really into now, and again, maybe this is because of family and, anyone that has kids too, like knows this, but like, I'm really in the selfless, I'm not saying like, oh, I'm so selfless. I'm sure I'm very selfish in places, my wife will tell you, but like, I'm like very like, I am so much in a place where I'm like, I'm not the most talented at this thing. I'm not probably the person that should be designing it or whatever it is, or writing it. I want to help people either be their best selves or help them just, look at it another way. So like, I'm really in this helping people, like a lot of my team members, but as well as the world, which is even some of my personal mission stuff that I've been doing, even if it's small.
Right. Like, just go outside and be better to yourself.
I know.
Because that impact comes back.
Yeah. So, we obviously feel like, well, great. So you've learned this about yourself, whatever. Like, so like, why going brand side? What made it so cool, and why did you do that, and why is it aligned with your values? So, my first stop, after sort of deciding to like leave agency world, besides some freelance and stuff, was cannabis. Well, we live in Colorado, so the first stop's really
it's bigger than software here.
Yeah, you can just walk down the street and trip on it. But like it was. So like for me, I wanted to do something in the cannabis industry. Like again, at the time, this was probably about 2-3 years ago. There was a little bit more of a boom. I think now it's a little bit of a plateau as far as like the craziness, but it's more acceptable, which is good. But anyways, I really wanted to help, create accessibility to it. Now it sounds silly. Like
it's also an industry I think at that time that needed some legitimization.
Totally.
Like, can someone put some big pants on this, and it's not like the hippie shop out back.
And that's exactly what it was. Yeah. And again, part of mergers and all these things, like I think I get attracted to sort of these, like, let's put the organization, the culture, the work on a different track that's a little bit, not to say big boy pants, but more of just like, let's give it some actual thought.
Right.
And stuff. And so for me, like, I just wanted to help people like have a choice for cannabis. Like, again, I have anxiety, my stresses in life. I feel like it helped me. Like I was a customer first, and then I became the spokesperson. It was literally that. And again, that was so exciting for me to like be part of building a company or like making it more aware to culture that you have choices, or at least which is funny. I feel like a lot of the marketing was like lobbying. Like it was actually very political. It felt like, even though it wasn't, but it felt like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, which speaking of political, like one of the things that we did do, where again, this is one of those things where I'm like, like I just want to help people. Like, and this is where like I was so excited at creativity and like.
And the cool people you get to work with.
And the cool people I got to work with. So this is legit like that's 3 million square feet. That's a lot. But for you farmers, Jay.
Yeah.
76 acres, big.
Twice as big as my place.
So this is a legit farm in Kansas that we put an art installation in. That's part of this art we created with Shepard Ferry and his team. He has it called Studio Number One. So he was part of this and his team was as well. But we created this piece of art to really like create awareness around like, a giant hand holding a pot leaf, like for real, dude. Like, but no, it's like, no, like we were CBD to be quite honest, but like, it's really about how do we reframe the conversation around health and natural alternatives. So like this was like a conversation piece. We actually put this in Kansas, which at the time, and I still think it is, it's illegal.
I think it is actually too. Yeah.
It's still legal. So imagine a bunch of, very conservative people being like, why the hell is this in our state? But it was really to kind of get the conversation going. So,
well, and this is one of those industries too that you're working on. It's funny because it's outside, but more importantly, you're not only doing the thing that you're trying to convince people that this is a good thing, but you're trying to convince a world that this is a good thing, so that it can be made.
Totally. And it was again, it's one of those things like, especially working with Charlotte's Web, like you just hear so many stories. Like even the name Charlotte was based on a girl who had a very rare form of epilepsy, and it just helped her stop having constant seizures.
Yep.
And there's thousands and thousands and thousands of other children and people that have. So for me, it was like, this is great. Let's, I wanted to do my part in the world. I have a video. I guess we can show it.
Show it.
Do you want to show it?
Yeah.
Okay.
This is for the farmers, for the veterans, for the children, the parents, for everyone on Earth who believes in the power of hemp. This symbolizes the men, women, and children who trust in plants, to revolutionize how to care for themselves and others. This is for the warriors who've earned us the right to choose hemp as an option, for the families fighting for natural alternatives. And this is for Charlotte, the little girl who inspired a movement and showed us that we all need access to the power of botanicals. Because this isn't just art. This is our mission. It's what drove our founders, the Stanley brothers, to start Charlotte's Web. To give everyone an opportunity to reach out to Mother Nature for a helping hand. This is our fight, every day. Join us in the fight for access to hemp. TrustTheEarth.com.
So yeah, that was, again, all those people in there were like legit, real.
The Bobcat, was that the lawnmower you told me about?
Oh, yeah.
That the guy did it? That's not just a lawnmower though,
It's a
man.
Yeah, it's a sorry, yeah.
I thought it was going to be like a dude with like a push mower,
He's out there just, well, yeah, so the funny thing about that real quick is that it was done right at the beginning of the pandemic. Like, we were slotted to shoot and they're like, the country's shutting down, so we basically still were lucky enough to do that because it's out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
And it was one farmer, legit, GPS, like staring at a screen, like going stop, go, for a week straight before it grew.
Sometimes doing that kind of like that stuff, you could probably go do it in post or something, right?
No, it was really, But
it's the cool part is doing the real part of it.
Just part of it, like, we actually were, it was supposed to be a location for an event as well, but then the pandemic hit, so it just turned into more of just that. But it was really supposed to be some sort of like gathering place. But anyway. So I might as well talk about where I'm at now, I guess. So I'm at outside, I've said 30 times probably. And I think that's, if you look at how many times I say outside in here, it's a ton. But this is one of those things where I was really excited that I got the opportunity to work here. Like, I know it sounds cheesy, but I was at another job and I loved it, and it was great. But this was like, holy shit, like, this has literally been almost the exact words that I've been telling people, like, you got to experience the outside. You got to get out on a bike, hike. I don't care what it is. My thing's cycling, but like, do it, and it's good for you and your health. And this company was saying that, especially the CEO who I talked to starting this job. And this has sort of been like that perfect alignment of where my values were as, you know, a human. Especially as Asian. I'm Asian. It doesn't look like it. I might look like Ray Romano, an ethnic ambiguous individual, but I'm Filipino and half, but still I'm Filipino. And for me, it was like, especially coming to Boulder, there's not a lot of Asian people on bikes or outside as much as you'd want, or I'd wish there would be. There's few. I say few.
You find them.
Yeah, I find them. But this was also another thing. I was like, I want to help everyone get outside, especially my people. And, so that's kind of how I ended up here. If you guys want to know like how my values aligned, and one of the things that was like part of like being here is like, how do I help people get outside? Like, how do I find, you know, issues and problems in the world, and inspire people to do that? And one of the things that I got to do of late, which I'm super excited about, is it's super simple, it's super cheesy in a way, from a creativity standpoint maybe, but I just loved it. And it happened here in Boulder, but I'll play the video first. Maybe I won't talk too much. I'll just play it.
Here it comes. Places, everyone.
That was so cool!
Not expecting that on my morning.
If this was every morning, I would ride every day.
So that happened here in Boulder. I don't know if any of you were commuting and happened to do that, but it's Boulder, so a ton of people.
Was it even like was it an obscure day, or was it like bike to work day or something?
No, it was just like a random day. And
That's
I asked
amazing.
people to come down too, but like, it was a random day. And it was so funny to see like people like, what the hell? But then also it was also kind of funny because it's Boulder where people are like, oh man, I'm not in the race today.
Yeah.
And I was like, what race?
Because they just thought there would be a race.
Yeah,
going
it
on.
wasn't like a weird, it was like, oh man, yeah, another Ironman or something weird. And I was like, you know, people are like, no, this is just for you guys. So, but for me, again, I love riding bikes. And again, I've always wished that I was in the Tour de France, but you know.
But it is interesting because like I think one of the things that brands are realizing in-house is that some of this more like air quotes out there advertising kind of like style thinking for things versus them doing like, hey, we should do a banner ad or email campaign or whatever landing page. Wait, just give me a landing page with a fucking form in it. You know, like that's their go-to, right? Unless they're coaxed otherwise. So I think that is some of the inherent value, and it's exciting for me to see brands like welcoming that in and going like, dude, bring it. Give us some of that value.
Yeah, and I think, you know, hopefully we'll be doing more and more things like this, you know, because we are trying to get people outside. Obviously, we're also trying to sell, you know, magazines and digital subscriptions and content, all that stuff. But, you know, we have a hardcore mission. It's like, how do we live it and all that good stuff.
Right.
So,
But a lot of brands have a mission that very few of them like stand with it.
and that's
too.
literally, it's so funny. I can't tell you how many times, even working with outdoor brands, they're all the same.
Yeah.
They're pretty much nuanced differently. And I always say it's like, you know, it's how you act. And it's how you live it, or the passion behind it. And I think, luckily, I work at a place that has the passion. Now, how do we live it? And same with all of you guys. If you have that mission, that passion for wherever you are, like hopefully just keep living it and acting in that way. I guess.
Yeah.
So let me think, what else do I got here? I forgot. Oh yeah. Also part of outside, I just wanted to touch on just because it's technology and people can kind of.
There's even some irony to
There's
this,
some
right?
huge irony about it, which the irony is also like a point, but. Outside, we launched an NFT marketplace. I'll just let that sink in for a second. Yeah, NFTs. Now the problem, everyone's like, wait, what? So are you guys just trying to get on the bandwagon? It's like, well, no, not really. Actually, if you think about it, there's a group of people out there, and I'm gonna say the metaverse like lifers and the crypto nerds that are super just, I hate to say it, like if you're into those things, you're probably on your screen
a lot.
You know, and you're outside 6 minutes, 7 minutes a day probably because of that. And so for us was like, well, how do we get our mission and how do we inspire those type of people to actually get outside. And it's like, well, maybe you give them an NFT that can like inspire them to get outside. So this marketplace, I know it sounds stupid, it's NFTs, but literally every NFT comes with like a real world benefit. If it's like discounts on gear to buy your first bike or whatever, or if it's like free entry into like your first cycling.
That to me was
event.
what was sweet about it, that you got this little token of like, hey, I have this thing now that everyone's talking about, but there was some inherent real value.
There's real value, and like the thing about NFTs, which again, they look pretty. Like, so again, for me, design background, like, that's yay! I get to make pretty things, but then they have this real world benefit. So again, my values, I feel like are helping people. And so like, these are some things we did. So we launched the marketplace. There's this, thing called a passport that actually is gonna give you like early access to all the NFTs and some other perks. The great thing about NFTs that not everyone knows is that it's sort of like having it is like a membership weird. It's like you can constantly get benefits and perks as long as you own it. I know it sounds super nerdy and I'm really getting into this stuff, but like that's kind of what's cool about it. But we did some stuff for like, see all these people riding their bikes, like it's a thing called Biking for All, where we just wanted to help, like part of that finish line, flash finish, was we wanted to help people get outside, but also celebrate the diversity. And so we gave people the ability to like basically find their perfect avatar of a cyclist and like own it and like maybe get outside. And then upcoming, anyone going to the Warren Miller, the new film coming out, like you can get an NFT there for just, it's free for showing up. You just gotta do all this stuff online and stuff, obviously. But there's perks with that too. Like you might be able to get, free discounts on cool stuff, or like, free gear and discounts on things. But just owning that now, you're part of the outdoor community.
Well, I think back to the idea, like all of these things extend experiences, right?
Exactly.
And create more draw and then interest and the ability to stay connected to stuff.
Totally.
Too. So I think it was fascinating to me, like when you told me I'm working at outside, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Warren Miller's and all that.
Yeah.
And the expanse and reach of this, because I was kind of giving you shit too about like, I used to work in the ad industry, and I remember like, I was working on Dockers, man. I think I told you this. And we were working on khaki pants.
I wore my khakis.
And I'm sitting there with the creative director, and he goes, you know what we need to do? Go to Miami. And I was like, he wanted to go to Miami. It's not that we need. And then you were doing something in New York, but then I realized like you weren't just doing it because like New York is cool.
Yeah.
You're like, man, those people there need to get outside too. And I was like, oh, now I'm seeing like the extension or the connection to all this.
And it's like how you act and all that fun stuff. So yeah, again, this is just sort of the type of stuff that we're trying to do in our mission, but like also kind of what I'm
also makes your creative job very diverse too, right? Because you're doing physical experiences, digital experiences, all that, but it's experience.
Yeah, and again, I'll say it's like one of those things, like not every company wants to do things like this, or like even like with Domino's, like they didn't want to, why on earth would I spend money building
a car?
And it's funny of like, there's ways to connect with people versus just the obvious, like here's a banner ad, here's a coupon. It's like, no, there's other ways. And so I've been lucky enough and fortunate enough to just sort of bring that thinking, and I think, if you guys can do that too, which I know everyone has different skill sets that, why not? But yeah, that's kind of...
Dude, thank you so much. This is rad. Well, thank you everybody for coming. This is a First Friday event. So next First Friday, December, Steve Madison, is he still here? There he is. Steve is our next guest. You probably have all used his fonts in your life. Fascinating. I'm so looking forward to this. He's another one of those discussions pre-pandemic. I was like, Steve, would you please come do this? And here he is. So we're looking really forward to next month's issue. So come back, join us, and thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
All right. Good job, dude. You did really good. That was fucking